My name is Rebecca Hayes. I'm 39 years old, and I learned the hard way that family loyalty breaks as soon as betrayal becomes more convenient. I will never forget the tone of my mother's voice that day, clear, sharp, and merciless, as she rang out across the courtroom. "Your Honor, my daughter is not suitable to raise a child," she stated, her words cutting into me like glass. My chest constricted. Walls of the family court seemed suddenly too close, too claustrophobic. "She's unstable," my mother went on, her voice now steady, almost scripted. "Rebecca can't hold a stable job. She's been in and out of therapy, and quite frankly," she stopped to take breath, then stared at me directly, with eyes that no longer belonged to a mother. "I don't think she should have custody of my grandson." I sat at the defendant's table, my palms pressed flat against the polished wood, to stop my hands from trembling. My navy blazer felt heavier than armor, my white blouse suffocating against my throat. The ring I'd removed 6 months ago had left a pale, ghostly band on my finger, an uninvited reminder of everything I'd lost. Across the aisle, Marcus smirked. My ex-husband sat back in his chair, smug satisfaction on his face, that same smug satisfaction I used to confuse with charm. Next to him, his slick lawyer nodded in approval, each word my mother spoke hitting like a well-sharpened arrow. This was no accident. This was an ambush. "She's never provided stability," my mother pressed on, her voice growing stronger as the poison flowed. "She disappears for days, claims she's working, but I've never seen proof of any real job. My grandson deserves safety. He deserves a real home with his father." My eyes wandered to the front row. Tyler, my precious boy, 8 years old, his dark eyes glassy and wide with confusion, sitting next to him, her shoulders rigid, her eyes cast anywhere else but on me, was my sister Karen. Her silence was a judgment in itself. I remembered the last 2 years of sleepless nights where trial preparation was jug-furiously combined with reading bedtime stories, of existing on insufficient rest and sheer determination, of struggling to be both the lawyer my cases required and the mother my son required. But my mother wasn't yet done. "She resides in a shoebox downtown. She," sneered, "has an old car that breaks down at any moment. She can hardly afford his school supplies. Meanwhile, Marcus," she pointed to him as if offering a trophy, "Marcus has a lovely house, a secure job, and the ability to give Tyler all the things Rebecca was not able to." The gallery hummed with whispers. Marcus's family took up an entire row, bobbing their heads in agreement, like a chorus of silent jurists. On my side, a few friends, faces clenched with anger and disbelief, people who knew the actual truth about me. Judge Patricia Morrison sat, expressionless on the bench, her face a mask. We'd worked together professionally for more than a decade. I looked for some spark of recognition, a hint of comprehension. Nothing. She was the epitome of objectivity, and then the coup de grace. "Your Honor," my mother said, voice crescendoing, as if she were making a closing statement, "my daughter has been secretive about her so-called career her whole life. She won't tell us what she really does. For all we know, she is harboring something criminal, something that endangers my grandson." The gallery burst into muted murmurs, a wave of skepticism washing over the room. Marcus sat forward, lips twisted in triumph. His lawyer, James Crawford, stood suavely, fastening his bespoke jacket. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. It's obvious the best interests of the child would be served by giving full custody to my client." I balled my fists under the table. My mother's betrayal seared more fiercely than Marcus's self-satisfied smirk. This was no longer just a battle for custody. This was warfare. The mother's failure to offer even the most rudimentary stability, paired with her vagueness regarding her so-called employment, raises serious questions regarding her ability to parent. Marcus's attorney concluded with ease, his words slicing through the air like an ultimate decree. I didn't budge. My hands remained neatly folded on the table, steady and quiet, though my heart pounded in my ears. 15 years on the bench had taught me one thing more than anything. Patience wins wars. Timing was everything. Let them believe they had already buried me, Ms. Hayes, said Judge Morrison at last, her controlled voice drawing every gaze in the room to me. How do you reply to these charges concerning your work and your competence to support your son? I stood slowly, calculatingly, like a queen taking back her throne. My chair creaked softly against the floor, the sound cracking through the courtroom hush. Your Honor, I spoke up, my tone even but firm. I'd like to bring in a witness to clarify those issues. Marcus's attorney tensed, taken aback. Objection, Your Honor. We were not given notice of additional witnesses. I indulged in the slightest of smiles. The witness was only available today, but I think his testimony will clear up every doubt regarding my employment status. Judge Morrison looked at me for a second before he nodded. Very well, call your witness. I stepped toward the courtroom doors. The hinges creaked quietly as I pushed them open. A tall figure walked in, his presence dominating the room before he even said anything. Impeccable dark suit, silver hair perfectly combed, a bearing that exuded authority. The gallery collectively gasped. Your Honor, I declared loudly, my voice ringing above the shocked silence. I called Chief Justice William Barrett to the stand. The response was charged with electricity. Heads turned. Whispers hissed like sparks in desiccated grass. My mother's face fell, confidence leaking into skepticism, then terror. When the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court approached the witness box, I greeted him with professional poise, my voice crisp and authoritative. Chief Justice Barrett, would you be so kind as to state for the record who I am? He gazed at me steadily, his deep voice firm and formal, but interlaced with respect. You are the Honorable Rebecca Hayes, Associate Justice of the State Supreme Court. You have sat on the bench with distinction for 8 years. A hush fell over the courtroom so complete. I could hear my mother's sharp intake of breath. Marcus's attorney fumbled through his papers, his mask of control shattering. Chief Justice, I continued, could you describe the scope of my work? Justice Hayes handles some of the most complicated civil and criminal cases in this state. He responded smoothly. She sits on our panel of appeals for capital cases, chairs our panel on judicial ethics, and has written landmark decisions in family law and child welfare. From the front row, Tyler's eyes widened, his little face aglow with dawn clearing. Finally, the pieces of sleepless nights, closed doors, and boundless files fell into place. His mother wasn't missing. She was upholding the weight of justice. One last query, Chief Justice, I said, my eyes slicing across at my mother, whose lips quivered in silent horror. Could you speak to my financial stability? He permitted the faintest of smiles. Justice Hayes makes a salary of $195,000 a year, plus benefits. She has a penthouse condo in downtown and a mountain lodge. Her financial reports, naturally, are a matter of public record by law. The resulting silence was oppressive. I addressed Judge Morrison, speaking in a calm but steel-edged tone. Your Honor, I'd like to clarify why my family didn't know my position. Judge Morrison leaned forward a little, her interest evident. Go on. 8 years ago, when I was sworn into the Supreme Court, I made a decision, I declared, each word falling like a gavel blow, to maintain my professional life and personal life separate from each other, not shamefully, but out of need. Some positions call for discretion. My eyes scanned the room, over Marcus's broken haughtiness, over my mother's pale complexion, over the seats full of hushed witnesses. And today, I inserted, my voice slicing through the tension like a knife. You've all seen why. It was never about shame, I asserted, my voice firm. Echoing in the quiet, it was because I wanted my son to have a normal childhood, free of the burdens of titles, free of the focus of my calling. I didn't want him to grow up as the judge's kid. I wanted him to be simply Tyler. I faced my son. His little face was a war zone of feelings, pride bursting in his eyes, confusion following. That's why I lived simply, I went on, each word deliberate. Why I drive a utilitarian car, why I do my shopping in plain stores. I wanted Tyler to understand the worth of working, of humility, not entitlement, not privilege. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Marcus looking at me, his face empty, like he was discovering me for the first time in his life. All those years we were married, he had laughed at my dull courthouse job, never once bothering to ask me what I really did. His ignorance now threatened to choke him like a noose. The reason I couldn't always attend school events, I pressed on, my voice tightening, was because I was writing decisions that determined the fate of children across this state. The reason I disappeared into late-night briefs was because families depended on me, not just mine, thousands of them. Chief Justice Barrett leaned forward in the witness stand, his voice bearing the gravitas of decades of experience. If I may say so, Your Honor, Justice Hayes possesses one of the finest legal minds I've seen in more than 30 years. Her decisions have been affirmed by federal courts. She's acknowledged nationally for her work in family law. I proceeded back to the defense table, but my burden had changed. I was no longer sitting as a defendant. I sat as who I always was, a judge, a guardian of families, a woman who had earned her position through years of dedication and sacrifice. Your Honor, I addressed Judge Morrison, my voice growing stronger with conviction. I've dedicated my life to finding safe homes for children. I've taken them from abusers. I've crafted rulings that prioritize their welfare over convenience, over money, over anything else. And now I'm accused, by my own family, of not being fit to care for my own child. The room was as silent as stone. This charge isn't only untrue, I told him, my gaze slicing into Marcus, and then my mother. It's a slur on every parent I've battled for, on every child whose future I've protected from this very bench. I turned, meeting my mother's gaze. She was white, shaking, the shadiness of her betrayal, staring back at her in the cold courtroom lighting. What's most hurtful, I replied icily, is that these charges are made by individuals who never at any point in time bothered to learn the truth, who never inquired about my work, who jumped to the worst conclusions because it was convenient for them. Marcus's attorney struggled to recover. Your Honor, we had no prior knowledge of what? I broke in curtly, my voice cutting across his. Of the fact that your client was married to a state Supreme Court judge for 6 years and never bothered to ask what she did for a living. Judge Morrison's eyes grew smaller as she transferred her attention to Marcus. Mr. Crawford, is it a fact that your client had no idea what his wife did for a living during their marriage? Marcus stuttered, his voice cracking. She told me she worked at the courthouse. I thought she was a clerk or something. The ridiculousness hung there in the air, thick, and humiliating. A 6-year husband of mine had demeaned my life's work to being a paper pusher. Your Honor, I stated resolutely, taking advantage of the moment. I'd like to enter into evidence my judicial performance reviews, my financial disclosure reports, and the custody evaluation report by Dr. Sandra Williams, the court's appointed child psychologist. The documents landed on the defense table with a decisive sound, like the ring of a gavel. Judge Morrison thumbed through the pile of papers, her incisive eyes scanning the evidence with professional speed. At last, she spoke, her voice crisp and authoritative. Under Dr. Williams's assessment, Justice Hayes is graded as an outstanding parent with sound emotional connections to her child. There are no issues about her capacity to care, structure, or guide. The words fall on the room like the blow of a gavel. I let my eyes scan the courtroom one final time. My mother, now tiny, unable to look me in the eye. My sister Karen, with tears welling up as guilt clung to her shoulders. Marcus, looking at the ground, shorn of his arrogance. And then Tyler, my son, looking at me with new pride, his face lit up by comprehension. I stood up, my voice level but laced with steel. Your Honor, I've devoted my life to ensuring children's best interests are put first. I've seen parents weaponize their children. I've seen families fracture under greed and resentment. And I've seen the damage caused when lies are given more weight than truth. Today, that pattern was nearly repeated here. My voice grew stronger, carrying through the hushed courtroom. I am asking for sole physical custody of my son, supervised visitation for the father, until he has taken co-parenting classes. And I ask that future custody issues eliminate extended family members who have already proven themselves willing to offer false and harmful testimony. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her voice serious. Based upon the testimony and the egregious nature of the mother's testimony, full custody is awarded to Justice Hayes. The father shall have supervised visitation for a period of 6 months, reviewable after completion of parenting classes. The rustling of chairs echoed through the chamber as the decision hit them. Tyler jumped out of his seat and came running to me, small arms clasping tightly around my waist. "Mom," he breathed, his voice quivering with relief. "Why didn't you ever tell me you were a judge?" I knelt so we were face to face. My hand stroked back his hair. "Because I wanted you to love me for being your mom," I said quietly. "Not because of my title." He grinned, boyish mischief restored at last. "I think it's cool." "Does that mean you can put people in jail?" I smiled softly, kissing his forehead. "Sometimes, but usually it means I assist families in learning to care for one another." This was our moment, until my mother leaned in, uncertain, free of the venom she'd had hours before. "Rebecca," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't know. I'm so sorry." I rose slowly, my arm closing tightly about Tyler. My gaze seared into hers, hard and unflinching. "You took an oath that I was not suitable. You attempted to cut me from my child without understanding the first thing about my life, my job, or my potential to be his mother. You opted to believe Marcus's fabrications rather than your own daughter's honesty." Her lips quivered, tears running uncontrolled. "I thought I was assisting." "No," I interrupted her harshly. "You weren't assisting. You were aiding and abetting. Marcus told whatever lie was necessary, and you carried his gun for him. You betrayed me. Worse, you betrayed Tyler." The courtroom was almost vacant now. Only the family and a handful of quiets. Bystanders remaining. My words echoed through the empty room. "For 15 years you've asked about my work, and I gave you vague answers because I wanted privacy, but you never pressed. never cared enough to ask again. You assumed my silence meant failure. You assumed that because I didn't boast about my career, I had nothing worth boasting about. I turned, meeting Karen's tear-stained eyes, having become a judge at 31, one of the youngest in state history. I've authored opinions taught in law schools. I've defended thousands of families. I've dedicated my life to fairness and justice. And yet, my own family... I closed my throat, the words struggling to come out before I reined in once more, viewed me as less than I am. From the gallery, Chief Justice Barrett stood, coming with the gravity of a man who knew the depth of betrayal and redemption. Justice Hayes, he declared firmly, his voice with quiet respect. I hope this experience does not extinguish your fire. Your work is more necessary than ever. I looked him in the eye and nodded, my voice unwavering. If anything, Chief Justice, it's reminded me why our work is so necessary. With Tyler's tiny hand in mine, I stepped out of that courtroom, not as a woman vanquished by betrayal, but as a mother vindicated, a judge unbroken, and a daughter who had finally seen the truth of where loyalty ends. As we emerged from the courthouse into sunlight, Tyler's small hand holding mine, I felt something shift within me. The burden of months, years, truly was gone. This trial, this betrayal, had cut something indelible into me. I'd spent so much of my own life cowering behind humility, protecting my son from the judgment my role could attract. But in the process, I'd concealed myself from the very people who should have known me best. That day had taught me something no courtroom ever could. Respect founded on assumptions is tenuous, but respect forged through honesty and integrity can never be broken. 6 months later, Marcus finished his parenting classes and was awarded unsupervised visitation. He never remarried, and he never again had the nerve to question my capacity to care for our son. My mother wrote a letter of apology to me. I never replied. Some betrayals cut too deep, disclosing not only a moment's lapse in judgment, but the very nature of a person's character. Those wounds do not heal with words. Tyler developed. Now he braggingly says to his friends, "My mom's a judge." He speaks of justice, fairness, of doing what is right. He has also learned the more difficult lesson that sometimes those who love you the most may hurt you the most, but their wounds do not establish your value. As for me, I ceased to dim my light. I ceased allowing modesty to be mistaken for weakness. I started claiming every bit of who I was and teaching my son that hard work and integrity are not things to hide, but to celebrate. The woman who entered that courtroom was the same woman who exited. The difference wasn't in my wins. It was in letting the world see me for who I really was. Justice, I knew, isn't just something you battle for in the courtroom. Sometimes, it's something you take for yourself, and that day, I took mine.